Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Lifestyle Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Karen McCarran with the Content Company, and I have my sidekick
I'm Ken
who's now,
McCarran.
he's been shunned into the basement podcast room because before we were sitting next to each other and it was too annoying. So now we're in
Oh,
opposite sides of
cozy.
our
Yeah.
house. His looks cooler than mine, though, I'm going to say, but I also, yeah, I'm picky.
Oh,
So,
you're nice and bright and sunny up there.
yeah,
Well, that's nice.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah. So we have our I guess our third guest on the show now. I love saying this name. I've been saying it in my head a billion times because it sounds like a mob name to me. But like, so this is Frankie. I'm hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, but Frankie FIhn. Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Wicked name, very cool. We actually that's I was going to tell him about Finnegan. We'll tell that story another time. But so welcome to the show. We were chatting a couple minutes beforehand, and I'm not going to do too big an intro. I like to let the guest kind of introduce themselves and tell us their story and how they got here. But I was just checking you out, like I said, and you're the author of the Beyond the Agency Box for Digital Marketing Agencies. So that's an interesting concept, first of all. And the quote that I love was "more beach, less laptop," which I also deeply. How do you do that? We would like to know. Your audience wants to know how the hell you do that. But I know we connected. I think it was through Josh Nelson's Orbit. Does that sound
Yeah. I
where
believe
we
so.
kind of clicked in there?
Most
Um,
likely.
yeah, and so you're obviously a digital entrepreneur. You've done, a lot of agency work. You've helped hundreds of clients, taught a lot of agencies how to do things better. So we said at the top we don't want to talk about strategy, but I do want to hear about how did you get to be where you are? Like, did you have a past life career wise and you ended up in digital? Give us sort of the story of how Frankie
Yeah.
FIhn came to be in this
Well, I'll tell
industry.
you, just like this whole like more beach, less laptop. It wasn't one of those things like I dreamed up on the vision board and said, this is what I want to do. I don't know if it was like for you guys, but like, there's all these people who got into digital marketing the last 3 years, and they're all like, I'm going to be a laptop entrepreneur. I'm going to travel the world. That happened to me, but that was not like planned. It all started actually for me in 2007. I was living in my hometown, Windsor, Ontario, Canada. And for those of you guys who've never been there, it's basically like, it's like the Canadian version of Detroit, Michigan. It's like close enough to hear the gunshots, but you don't get hit. And but it's very automotive. Like everybody works for
Yep.
Ford, General Motor, or Chrysler. They work for a supplier of Ford, General Motor, or Chrysler, or they work for like a restaurant that depends on them. And I don't know if you guys, or everybody listening to this remembers the 2008 financial crisis, but I do very well, and it was because locally, it really hit in like 2007 hard. Like it was Windsor, Ontario felt it a year before everyone else. And what that looked like is you'd open the newspaper and it'd say Ford fires 10,000 workers today. General Motors laid off 15,000 people in a quarter million city that like when they lay off 10% of the workforce in a day, like it's all really anyone could talk about. And so I'd always dreamed about like starting my own business, but truth be told, I don't think I really had the guts to do it. Like I think
Mm,
life just kind of forced me into it. And I remember I was like actively seeking a job. I was still like hardcore working on my plan B at that moment so that I would have a safe, stable income that I could kind of transition out of it. And there just wasn't anything. I actually remember the last straw for me. There were two in particular. I went to a job fair,
mhm.
and there were 50 different like people hiring, and they were all commission only sales. There was no like
Wow.
even get a salary for selling. And it was like I realized like if you want to get paid anything at all, you're going to have to sell. Like that was just very, very clear. Like that was the only thing available. And then my girlfriend at the time, she talked to the school board and they found out they had a janitorial opening. And it was like, you can be a janitor. And I was like, I'm gonna like clean up little kids' puke and shit. Like that just didn't sound like I just couldn't like even though I needed income, I was just like, I can't be a high school or a grade school janitor. And around that time, I had a friend of mine, and he was traveling back and forth to Florida with this guy, and they were doing short sales. They were like flipping real estate. And he wrote a little book on it. And he just called me up one day and said, Hey, Frankie, I wrote a real estate course, and we're going to sell it on the internet. And I remember just like laughing, going, We? Like, we, dude, like you wrote your own course, you sell your own shit on the internet. And he was like, Yeah, but I'm not any good with computers. And I'm like, yeah, but like I don't know how to sell things on the internet. I don't know how to make a website. Like if you bring me a broken computer, I can like troubleshoot what's broken and replace it. But I'm
Right.
like, I've never like he's like, yeah, but you can figure it out. And he just hung up the phone. And so all of this like was circling together in my life where it was like, okay, there's no real jobs available that are going to pay you a base anything. or you can be a janitor, or like whatever. Like, and I decided like I'm going all in on selling my buddy's courses. And so we did that, I don't know, for like I want to say like 6 to 12 months. And in doing so, I had to self-teach myself SEO because like I kind of did this field
Yep.
of dreams. Like I just figured if I put up a website, people would buy my course. I'd be an overnight trillionaire. I had my Ferrari picked out and everything. But it turns out like I didn't know anything about like actually getting people to even look at my stuff in the first place. And so I spent like probably a close to a year like just self-teaching and executing. And eventually we had like really high rankings, and somebody came along and said like they offered to buy it for like, we were, I was lucky to make like $300 a month on that thing at that time. And I forget what the person offered, but it was orders of magnitude more than I was making. And so I sold it, and I didn't know what I was going to do for 6 months. And then somebody came along and said, that SEO thing you did for yourself, could you do that for me? And that one
Mm-hmm.
person turned into two. And all of a sudden I was thrust into this, having a digital marketing agency. But I didn't even really have a word for it back then. Like a lot of the things that have terms, like I had what's known today as a white label agency, but
Right.
I didn't even know what white label was. I just had a guy come to me and said, like, a lot of my clients are asking about this. Can you do it and just tell them that you work for me? And I was like, sure, man, I don't care. If you can
Yeah.
mark my stuff up, go for it. And so like a lot of the things that it's really, really funny to me that like come 10 years down the line, I was like, I was testing that before that had a name. Like
Right.
and it wasn't even really like I had figured anything out. I was just kind of like, 20 years for the better part of failing forward. So about like, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, I ended up writing a book on it. And it's really, really funny to me because I've had friends who've written like business books, and they're all like, a lot of times they have like giant egos about it. They're like, you watch, I'm going to become a best-selling author. Everybody's going to know me. I'm going to be headlining in this. And to me, I was like, if there's just one person like me who's like sleeping on their girlfriend's couch trying to figure this stuff out, and like if I could just save you, take 8 years of struggle and turn it into
Yeah.
8 weeks, like that's worth it. I'm okay with writing it and selling one book. I kind of didn't know whether it would be a flop or like, sell really well, but it's eventually turned into like a bestseller, not like a number one, but it's, been on those Amazon lists for the better part of, 4 or 5 years or however long it's been out. I'm bad with dates, but it's one of those things. It's like, I really didn't wake up and say, I'm gonna be a digital entrepreneur and travel the world. And those things came later when it was like, hey, can you come to my event in Orlando? And you guys know this, one of the side effects of it's really weird for people who haven't been through this. I know people like literally all over the world, but I don't know a lot of people in any one place. So I can go
Wow.
to like a random city and I'm like, I know one person in that city, and I know one person who lives in that country. And so, we're always having these meetups all over the world, but it's funny because I don't really like, it's not like I go to one place and I know, a
Right.
thousand people or one person there, but it's a side effect of like my world has been permeated with all these digital entrepreneurs who like we meet up at places like conferences and stuff like that. We have a
Yep.
good time, then everybody goes somewhere else. And you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to hang out with that guy who lives in Costa Rica at some point. That those kind of things happen.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's the
Yeah,
story you're
no, that
looking
was
for, but
amazing. I
That's a
I
great
that was
story. Yeah.
yeah, it is a good story. It's funny because Ken and we just went for lunch to the lake, and before this we had a podcast this morning. We went for lunch, we came back, and we were just talking about like there's this loneliness of digital entrepreneurs that I don't think we talk enough about in terms of like there's deep impact, especially me. Like I would say I'm introverted, but I'm capable of being an extrovert. Like I did all the events, I inbound, all those things like all the time. But like as as a digital entrepreneur, especially with us, like I don't know, if does your wife work with you, or is she like, are you in the business together, Frankie, or no?
so we have like when we had 3 kids, it was like really, really important for us to kind of just be with them. Like we're homeschooling
Yeah.
them. So
Nice.
she's doing that. But like, I mean, she supports me in terms of like, hey, if I have a podcast, she's like, okay, I'll schedule time and take them out. So
Yeah. Yeah. So
she's
yes.
kind of like, she's there in the background in ways
Right.
where it
Way
wouldn't
more,
work without.
way more big. That's more important a job for sure.
And what's the
So
Frankie, what's the name of your sorry, Kara, what's the name of your agency? You didn't say. I don't think you
So I've built 3 of them over the years, and I'm in the third iteration where it like part of the reason I wrote a book that's called Beyond the Agency Box is I do mostly partnership deals where I like kind of do equity and other people's stuff. So I don't even really have a name anymore, and
Oh,
I'm
okay.
that
That's
it doesn't
cool.
have a name. I'm not like trying to fit in any box, but the truth is like you can't like for 20 years you could go look up my stuff on a website and find out everything we do about us, and now I don't even know how to describe it to other people at parties.
parties, what are those? But yeah, like it's so that my segue was the being on your own. Like if you're with your spouse, like Ken and I are together all the time, and it gets so it's tricky, right? Like it gets lonely for sure. And as you were saying, like I do a lot of crewing for Tony Robbins. So there's a like people literally all over the world that like I could, there's friends in Sweden and there's friends in LA and there's friends in New York and whatever, but there's nobody really close by that I click with at that level. So like one of the things that I love to hear about is your social life. I mean, I know we're all digital people. We like our little tunnels and we like to stay in it, but how do you manage that? Like when you're feeling like, holy shit, I'm getting tired of looking at the same four walls. I'm getting tired of talking to, the kids and the wife and blah, blah, blah. Do you ever get like to the point where you need a bit more outside time, or have you always been okay just kind of running the ship by yourself? Give me a sense of what your social life looks like if you have one.
Yeah, it's funny because like at least for me, what you're describing is like the longer and longer you do this, yeah, the more and more I find it hard to relate to everyday average people that are very much trapped in the 9 to 5 world. And it's the funniest thing because like my brother, for example, I love my brother dearly, but he because the world he's in, he has to schedule his one vacation like basically a
Mm-hmm.
year in advance. So he'll ask me a question of like, hey, what are you doing next July 1st at 7 p.m.? And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow. Like I'm just making it up as I go because we've had so much freedom and autonomy for so long that I don't, other than a few things here and there, like I don't really schedule things, and like my calendar is intentionally mostly open. But the side effect is the amount of people that you can actually relate to like gets smaller and smaller. And as kind of
Yep.
a side effect for that, like, I think every digital entrepreneur can relate to this. Like my mom died like about a year ago,
I
but
saw
up
that.
until the
Sorry.
point where she died, I could not tell her what I did for a living for like 20 years because she go, what is that again for SEO? Is that legal? Like, is that legal? Like your name, I've heard like there's scams on the internet, and I know people
Yeah.
sell like Viagra pills. Like you're not selling the penis pills, are you? I'm like, yeah, mom, the top Viagra
Bless her
for
heart.
and it was only like towards the very end of her life where I could show her videos of like me speaking on stage, and she would say the funniest thing. She's like, Frankie, there's like 1,000 lawyers looking at you. Like, why are you on stage? And I'm like, I know, mom, I was there, right? Like I gave the speech, right? Like I was
I know.
I
That's
had to
cute.
prepare for it a week in advance and everything, right? Um, so I think most people in our world can relate to the fact that like the deeper and deeper you get into this, the more like people who just go to the same place every day and do the same thing, and then take their one vacation a year and often go to the same place. Nothing against that, like there's lots of cool people, but like I just don't relate to that anymore. And so for me, like socially, I've become obsessed with community building
Mm-hmm.
for that reason. And so like I have a couple online communities, for example, that I've built up with like a whole bunch of agency owners. And I do it because I feel like really passionate about sharing this stuff. But at the same time, like there's a very selfish reason. Like I feel like you can never know too many cool people in this world. Like literally, I feel like I can't know too many cool people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, I just like as a side effect of building community, we have that. And we've also done that locally. So there's like, a much smaller number, but like Ilka's built all her moms. A couple of my entrepreneurial friends had to move away for a little while. I'm a little sad about that. But we have lots of like little beach fires where we all get
Yeah.
together and little community events. It's not perfect, but I did all that on purpose because like you described, like people used to tell me for a lot of years, oh, you're so lucky, you can like do it whenever you want, and you just get to set your own hours and you don't have a boss. And I was always like, you're lucky because you're going to get paid on Friday,
Yeah.
and because you don't have to work Sunday night at you know
Yeah, we've been
10:30.
talking about that lately. Or hey, care the
Yeah.
I see all these people that go to work every day going on 3 vacations a year. Every time I go somewhere, I'm working most of the time while I'm there, and it's a totally
Answering
different
client
vibe.
calls. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very true. So how did you end up in Mexico?
Well, because we kind of hit it. So Ilk and I had a life before kids that was about 5 months long, and it was a very interesting relationship because I was around her 24/7. So even though I'd been in a 10-year relationship before her, I felt like I knew her more because we literally were around each other. In fact, at some point, it was really, really funny because when we had a baby, well, I guess I should say when I knocked her up, let's be real. Um, when I knocked
Hashtag
her
shame.
up, I remember she said, hey, we should intentionally separate for a little bit. So just so we don't end up hating each other, like let's like take some intentional time apart. And we were in Sacramento, California at the time. And so I decided to like put on a little community meetup event. It was like a group meditation thing. And I remember as soon as I got back, she's like, "Where have you been? I've been looking all around the city for you." And I was like, "Didn't you just tell me to leave?" And unbeknownst to me, she had taken a pregnancy test 5 minutes after I walked out the door, saw the double lines, and it was like, "Get your ass back here!" And then spent the next 3 hours looking for me. In my mind, it was like, "Hey, we're taking an intentional time apart." Um, so to kind of go back to the original question is like, we kind of had the digital nomad lifestyle where we were just having like a never ending work vacation kind of hybrid lifestyle. And so for us, that meant, some places I'd stay a weekend, some places I would hang out for a week, some places I would settle down for 9 months. And we just kind of like went where we felt like going. I know it's not really a good answer. And it was like, it was an amazing thing. And then when we had kids, um, we wanted to be close to family. So my family is from Windsor, Ontario, Canada. I love you guys if you listen to this, but you guys are all drunken rednecks. So that wasn't
I didn't
really
say it.
on the table. And her family is like, they're not perfect, but they're cool. And so I was like, I want to be close to her family. So we ended up moving to Germany. And actually, the first little bit, like I was so in love with Germany. It was like for me living in this exotic land. I lived in Europe and there's mountains and just like the architecture's all old. And then there was the fact that like I could get in the car 7 minutes, I'd be in France, an hour
Right.
I'd be in Luxembourg, an hour and a half in Belgium. And that was so cool to me. And then from a business point of view, because of the time zone change, all my clients were in America and nobody woke up before 3 p.m. in my time. So there were no fires, there was nobody bothering me. And I got to have a slow morning every day. And there was nothing urgent to do in that time. And that was just amazing to me. And we loved it. And then all of a sudden the COVID madness began and Germany became an intolerable land for me to live, to the point where I was having like confrontations with police just for existing. It was like I was felt like I was being a criminal. Like I remember one of those, there was a forest we could walk through in about 40 minutes, you come out the other side in like rural France, like sound of music, middle of nowhere, hills, no towns, no people. And I remember we were walking through the trail and there's just a what I would call a police Nazi standing there. And he's like, "You can't go any further." I'm like, "Oh, so you're telling me over here, like, I'm totally safe from the virus on this side of the line, but over there it's going to like murder me and all my children." Meanwhile, we're in rural France away from nobody. And there was just things like that. And, most of the people seemed okay with following stupid rules, but I'm like, I've lived my life intentionally to be in my own little bubble where I don't have to operate by all these stupid rules. And there were so many like stupid rules being imposed on me. And like, to be honest, like I just don't do fear in general. I'm not playing your games. You guys want to all be terrified. And for the most part, like I had no judgments about anybody else or what they did, but a very real thing, like I wanted them to leave me the fuck alone. And for the most part, like that wasn't happening. It was like, for example, I remember we went into like a bank to like take out money from the machine. And they had a sign up that said, "Hey, there's 6 bank machines, but because of COVID, you can only use 3. And so Ilka, my wife, went in and she grabbed the 4th bank machine, naughty little girl, and went in and took some money. And of course, in the time she went in there to take out money, a police officer decides, "I need to take out money," pulls up right behind me. And he saw her walk in and then looked, and he was like 3 and he was counting on his hand. And he looked at me like I was the dumbest person in the entire world because I couldn't read the sign. And I was kind of like, "Well, I'm a level past you, buddy, where I read the sign, I understood the sign, but I thought it was fucking stupid. And so I'm just going to ignore it because like that's just, that's fucking dumb." And so I remember I had a South African friend and in Germany, it's an arrestable offense to use the word Nazi. You cannot say that in public, but
Actually?
he said, yeah. And it's a really funny thing too, because I didn't know this until I lived there, but they have a thing they're all indoctrinated with called World War II guilt. And it's basically like, you killed the Jews. You're all shitty people. Don't ever tell anybody when you're abroad you're from Germany. Don't ever be proud of being German because you guys are the Jew killers. And so they're all filled with this World War II guilt. And he says, "If you're ever in trouble with the police, say the word Nazi. Locals will be arrested for it, but as a foreigner, it hits like a sledgehammer, and they will back down, and they will feel guilty, and they will cower down." Well, that was never battle tested. So he was looking at me and he was wanting to do something. And I remember I just said in English, where, I'm living in Germany, they all speak German. I'm like, "What is it with these fucking Nazis?" And I was pretty upset, obviously. And he understood me because he spoke enough English. And then boom, there was like a death stare. Like, "Did you just call me?" And then he said in English, like, "What did you say to me?" And I said, "You heard me, Nazi. Just leave me the fuck alone. I'm just trying to take money out of the machine."
my money
And
out of
and
the machine.
then at that point, Ilka came and we walked away. Thankfully, I did not get arrested. But I was like Ilka, I can't sit here. I'm going to be arrested just for taking money out of the machine. Like I'm a
Yeah.
criminal for existing now. Like, and I remember saying, like, where can we go to that doesn't have these stupid lockdowns? And at the time, there were only 6 countries that were even open. Like they had open borders. And I remember the 3 we were considering were Mexico, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica.
Hmm.
And like we mentioned earlier, like I know one person in each of those places. So I'm like, who do we know there that's living there? And we message them, how are things there? You know, would you recommend it? Blah, blah, blah. And we decided on Mexico. And then last minute, she had a midwife friend that said, hey, I got a second home in La Paz. Have you guys ever considered La Paz? And up until 5 minutes before that, I'd never heard of it. So the answer was no. And Ilka Googled it and watched all these videos. And an hour later, she said, this is the place. So we took an Airbnb for 60 days and have been here for like over 3 years now. And I consider it home. So, but it was very much
That's
unplanned.
amazing.
But when we got here, it was a breath of fresh air because, you know,
Yeah.
even though they had lockdowns, like nobody really cared, nobody really enforced it. It was
That was like Florida. Florida
Yeah.
wasn't really locked down when I went there. Like I had to, I mean, I have a outstanding $6,000 ticket, Ken. Yeah.
It was 16
'Cause-
originally, but they might have knocked it down.
No, it was six. No,
It was high.
it was really high, like ridiculous fucking price for, I landed in Toronto from, where was I? I was doing a Tony event, probably a crude event in Florida. And
Yeah.
I refused to go to the hotel in Toronto here at the Pearson. They make you,
Yeah.
that was when they're making you go to the hotel. And I said, I'm not,
Yeah.
and I said, I'm anxious. I'm fucking tired. I'm not going to a hotel. Like I'll go self-isolate for 2 weeks, blah, blah, blah. But and a police officer goes, just go take the ticket. Just go. It's fine. And I'm like, okay. So I went and I had to go through this whole fucking line where they're, you know, what do you, like, you know, the drill.
Yeah.
And
You're
I
kind
said,
of
I'm
like a fugitive right now.
yeah. And I'm like, I said, I'm not staying in the hotel, like for a number of reasons, but it's going to cost me $1,000 and you're going to get the test back in less than 24 hours, which means I can go home. So you're getting 2 free days out of me. So $600-700 that I'm not getting back because you won't repay me after. Like they made you. And so I said, fuck it, I'm leaving. And I took my ticket and I walked out. And I got a I think it was $6,200 ticket. It's still outstanding. And I said, I'm not fucking paying. Like, are you high? And then the very next day, they stopped with the hotel, like forcing you into hotel. But it was and it's funny, like we're content writing company. Obviously, we write content for guys like you and in agencies. And at the beginning of COVID, I remember saying to Ken, there's no way they're like, we're fine. No one's gonna stop using content. Boy, was I fucking wrong. Like within 30 days, our business went down about 50% because all the plumbers and the landscapers and the blah, blah, blahs who were freaking out, they were canceling their agencies. And then the agency wouldn't have work for us. And everyone just panicked. And it was an interesting time. The thing that I found the most incredible about it was, you know, people talk about division, but it showed you the sheeps from everybody else. And you know, I could go anywhere and I could find someone like me. Like we were magnets to each other. We're like a tractor beam, right? I'd go to Home Depot. There'd be one guy without a mask and I take my mask off. I'm like, how are you doing that? And not getting anybody talking shit to you. He's like, no one's saying nothing. So I'm like, okay. And I remember Ken and I recently, like, if it ever came back that masks became mandatory, there is zero fucking chance I'm putting that shit on my face ever again. I didn't at the end.
You need it there, Care.
What?
This is a different version of the digital lifestyle.
Well,
No, but it's
well,
cool.
we just went
I
there.
didn't
We
wear
went there.
one.
COVID edition, yeah.
In fact,
But
actually,
COVID edition.
we went as far as getting medical exemptions, which may or may not have been legit. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, I don't know how you got them. We tried, but I may or may not have gotten certifications also.
Yeah, but
May
I
or
remember
may not have been legitimate either. But
we flew from Frankfurt to Mexico City, which is like a 12-hour flight with the only people in the airport with faces. And I actually remember how funny it was because you see how everyone's just complying even though they don't believe in it. Because I remember like some airport security came up to me and he was like, hey, you gotta wear a mask in here, blah blah blah. It's actually we all of us have medical exemptions. Oh, really? And then you know
where do you get that?
And then he was like, can I get one of those? How do I get one of those? I hate wearing this stupid thing all day long. And I was like,
Yeah, I bet.
fucking take it off, dude. If enough of you guys say no, they won't do it. It's like they're only doing it because you're just mindlessly going along with it.
Yep. That's true. So
Like, you're
to
not
that,
sick. You don't have to
I
pretend to be
know.
sick. You don't have to give in to fear.
Where was I yesterday? Oh,
Like,
at Apple. I was at Apple yesterday in Yorkdale Mall, and 4 employees are wearing masks, and I'm like, what are you afraid of? Like, and that's their own journey, and I actually feel empathy for people like that, especially young people like
yeah,
that, because you know that they've been brainwashed the shit out of, right?
yeah.
Um, so to that, let me ask you then, kind
How's
of
it
your
been living in
thinking.
Mexico for the past 3 years? Have you been enjoying yourself?
Like a
We
Ken trying
love
to
it so
steer
much
the
here. No, but like it's cool if you want to change directions. That's cool.
whatever,
Uh,
Ken. Me and Frankie
Yeah,
are
well, that's
having our
enough.
own
Yeah,
conversation over. I
we
was
can
going
have
to
a
ask something
promo.
about digital agencies, so you cut me off. But go
Oh,
ahead.
okay, okay, okay.
I was going to say, like, since COVID, and there's been a million people who have become digital entrepreneurs. What are your thoughts on that? Like, I mean, we all know we've been in, like, Ken and I've been in digital since like the early 2000s in some form or another. But so I know a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to start an agency and so I know you touched on it, but like, do you know people that would come to you and be like, I'm going to start a digital marketing agency now that I'm home? And what did you have? I know I had conversations with a couple of friends who said it. I was like, go for it. Just let me know how that goes. What are your
yeah.
thoughts? Like, did you see a lot of that happening in your circle? Like, people thought, ah, fuck it, I'm not going back to work.
Only
I'm going to
every
be an SEA.
day,
Yeah.
and including today. But like, it's one of those things. I think there's a segment of our market. I call them the bro marketers, where they're usually like guys who are like 18 to 25, single guys. And they love to make this business sound easier than it is, where it's just like, man, just DM some people, bro, get some booked appointments and sell some shit. Like, that's basically their message in and 0
Yep.
to 10K, 0 to 100K, scale, 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 like those dudes.
Yeah.
And
That's really
I'm not
good.
saying
Well
there
done.
isn't some truth where, like, if you put yourself out there and you message a lot of people, you probably will sell some stuff. But they leave out a lot of pieces, and I think they do more injustice to our space because people go in with all these bullshit false expectations, and then they find out, which you guys already know, that sometimes it's really fucking hard and it's really fucking lonely. And a lot of the problems you're going through, like, you can't ask your friend or family member about. Like, you're going through that in isolation. How do I tell my mom there's a fucking Google update and, like, holy shit, 20 of my clients are fucking down, everybody's pissed at me, my phone's ringing, like, fucking Google, why do you gotta fuck me again? Like, that's not a relatable problem that I can go
Right.
bring up to other people. And so I'm all for people doing it as long as it's done with a dose of reality, not a dose
Yeah.
of like, oh, just fucking message people and they'll look like I got 10K right here and I scaled to the fucking moon. And
Yeah.
and what nobody talks about in all of that is all that's really happening as people sell all these courses and shit like that, is the people's inboxes get noisier and they ignore more and more people, and it only gets harder on you. And I saw this where, like, Ty Lopez sold a social media course, and it was basically like, here's how to get, roofers and general contractors to pay you for social media. And he included an outreach script that, like, hey, message people and say this thing and they'll hire you. And I have no doubt that worked. But what they failed to mention is they sold 60,000 copies of that course. And now, the maybe only 5% of them actually take action on it. But that's still like, a lot of people sending the exact same copy and
Mm-hmm.
paste message that gets ignored. And then when you throw in AI to the fact that AI can, like, now send more messages and stuff like that, I feel like it's getting noisier. And I think a lot of people just go into it thinking it's going to be easy and I'm just going to start a business. I literally just had a friend who's like, oh my God, my friend made 40K starting a marketing agent. I'm going to do it. It's going to be so amazing. And now they're stuck in, like, what's a DNS? How do I set up a website? They're
Oh,
like asking me all these questions. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, there's a
shit.
fulfillment element that they don't consider at the start. It's,
right.
you can sell the thing, but then you have to actually follow through and
Exactly.
Execute.
fulfill whatever you just promised.
Exactly. But I mean, I think it's a beautiful business model. I mean, at the same time, like, I've traveled the world, I've met all kinds of cool people, I've had freedom and autonomy. As long as I have, like, not shitty Wi-Fi, I can earn a living anywhere in the world, do what I want. So I'm, like, a big fan of it. I'm just not a big fan of people going into it thinking you're
No.
going to push a button, send a magic message. I kind
Right.
of compare a lot of our market to me, which I consider just noise. But I had a friend very early on named Dave, and Dave was, like, literally the only other internet entrepreneur that I knew who's really making real money, like, doing this. And so he immediately became like a god in my eyes. And so I read all his stuff and studied and, like, looked up on him. And he was selling a course back in those days called Insider Internet Dating. and insider internet dating was about like, way when like online apps and things like that were like very much in its infancy. Like, hey, you
Mhm.
can meet people on the internet. If you know how to write a profile and talk to people, like you can get dates basically from your living room kind of thing. And I remember there's a thing that was the most popular topic in the space. And even then I thought it was ridiculous. It was the magic pickup line, like this idea that you're going to go up to any girl on the street, you're going to say this one line and she's just going to throw her underwear at you or want to get married with you on the spot or whatever. I don't even know what they're thinking, but the idea that there's some magic line that you can say. And I see like the side effect of a lot of that bro messaging is people come to me all the time and they ask me, what's the magic line I'm going to say? And I'm
Right.
like, the magic line is there's no fucking magic line. And the minute you looking for it and start looking for something that sounds like real work, but like predictable, scalable, like as you guys are doing, like scaling a lot of content, do that long enough, people will contact you and say, I'm interested.
Yeah.
The more you're looking for something like that. So to kind of just, answer the original question is like, I don't know, I'm for people doing this business because I think it's great and more people need it. I'm just not for people doing it like churn and burn, bro, send a message, sleep with her, throw her aside kind of mentality. I think that just
Yeah.
does more to
And it
space.
like it
How many
takes like, sorry, we've been in it for 10 years, like this, and we have to
at the
pivot our
content
asses.
company?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
longer
Like the
than that.
content company is 10 years old and we have to pivot our asses off all the time. And I think that's what you're right. That's what's missed. It's like because a lot of people still associate the internet with fast money and
Yeah.
How many
not.
agencies are there, Care, on Clutch? 90 something thousand
259,000. Like
agencies
marketing,
registered, listed
email,
on.
like that's just on Clutch, right? So
Yeah.
but yeah, like it's this weird at first. I mean, people half the time like that will say, well, we own a content writing company. What's that? Well, we write content like blogs and website content, long form, blah blah. Oh, and still most people are like, oh, I'm like, well, when you Google something and a page comes up and you read it and you see a thing call and yeah, okay. So a lot of people still have no idea what we do even. So it's hard to even say that to friends and whatever. Like my people that I'm close to are like, what? But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's important to like give that messaging that it's not an overnight, it's not even a year, it's not even two. Like if you don't have, I've said, if you don't have 3 years to comfortably put at something, any business, but digital, like you don't have
Yeah.
income of some other kind, then don't fucking do it. It takes, just like SEO takes time, building an agency takes. I would
Yeah.
never, no
I wouldn't be
disrespect, but I would
surprised if
never.
that's on lists. Like you look up how to make money online these days. There's
Oh, for
this,
sure.
well, there's
Oh, for sure.
copywriting, and there's probably do SEO for people is one of the things. Do emails for people, and people kind of gravitate toward that. Say, oh shit, I'm going to do that now, and
Yeah.
stinks though. That's the problem. They have no idea what they're doing. They just know the thing they want to do because
Yeah.
they hate going to their job every day. Basically,
Yeah.
they want the
Yeah.
freedom part, but they don't want the first 2 years of never having any days off at all, kind of working on the weekends and late at night stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
The
for
discipline
everyone,
part.
but it is fun.
You know what I'd
It's
say?
better than the alternative.
Can I just add one little
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
I found that this life makes 90% of your life like exponentially better. There's no alarm clocks, there's no bosses, you do it
Mm.
in your own way. The 10% that it makes harder, and that's the part that nobody really wants to talk about, it's like exponentially harder. And I was actually thinking about this. I was talking to somebody earlier, but where we're at in Mexico, since you asked me, Ken, like I love our setup. Like, so I have like mostly because we have young kids and I have a lot of help. So like I have a nanny who's here right now watching my kids. We got somebody who cleans our house. We got a pool guy, we got a babysitter who helps us have a date night. We got somebody who gathers firewood for us. I got a guy who cleans my car. And I remember one of the things that happened was Ilka was at a bank machine. Like she was just taking out cash because everything's cash around here. And she had my wallet with her and she got pickpocketed. And
Mm.
so I lost all my credit cards, all my bank cards in a single instant. Of course, I call my bank and they're just like, oh yeah, no problem. Just, walk into the BMO branch around you. And my home branch is in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, all of, like 3 flights away or whatever. And I would need the credit cards to buy those flights in the first place. I'm not even sure at the time Canada would even let me in the country. And there's all of that. And then at the same time, and I remember it was December, I have a team of Filipino VAs. And in both cultures, Mexico and the Philippines, it's custom to get paid a double month at Christmas. Like they get a bonus 1 month salary. And then also right at the same time, Ilka had a car accident, and the way it works around here, like nobody really has insurance, so we just basically had to pay our own car and our own kind of damages. So we ended up having to buy a car. And so in a matter of like 2 weeks, I had to figure out how to buy a car. I had to figure out how to pay every Mexican employee twice. And I had to figure out how to pay every Filipino employee twice. And I had no access to money, zero access to any of my own money. And I had to like sell some things and do some things and then direct them. Like I'd have people manually pay me into a Mexican bank account. And it didn't matter that I had, all the funds, in my account because I had zero access to it. And how do you tell a normal person that like, oh, you got to pay twice as much this month for everything that, upkeeps your life and you have no access to it and you're selling things and everybody wants to, hey, can I pay you this way? No, you can't because I can't access that anyway.
Right.
And you're asking people to jump through all these hoops. And I managed to survive by like the skin of our teeth. Like it was one of those, hey, we ate ramen noodles, even though our employees, got paid double and they got extra Christmas presents under the tree. We're having noodles and potatoes again today, kids. It was like one of those months. Well, you like the amount of relief I felt when the FedEx package showed up. And that was the other thing. It was like getting a replacement. I could send it to my home address. I had to have my friend go pick up my mail, receive it. Then he had to like FedEx and send it to it. And there was like, because it was Christmas holidays, of course, the original handling super slow. And so there was like 30 days where I basically had no access to funds. And I don't think enough people talk about like the difficult part of it is exponentially more difficult in ways that normal people can't comprehend.
No.
Like to me, it was never an option that I'm going to fire all these people or just screw them over and not pay them, especially right before Christmas. That would like, sorry guys, I told you I was going to pay you double, but this month you get nothing.
Yeah. that in the early days of the content company, we used to write the content and then invoice because we didn't know what we didn't know and we just trusted people. And we got in so much, like we were like thousands of dollars behind on paying writers at one point because we would write it, they would write it, the client would fuck around and wouldn't pay on time in 30 days, 40 days, and we're chasing invoices. And eventually, I think, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we moved to Shopify. So now you go on, you order your content, we create it, you get it, and you can ask for unlimited revisions. But like the days of chasing invoices, and people don't know that, right? Like people on the outside are like, what do you mean you had a multiple 5-figure month? What are you complaining about? I'm like, because I'm chasing fucking Buddy for all of that money. And I still have to pay the writers because the writer doesn't give a shit. Like, exactly. And all that type of thing. And I agree. I think we don't like, there's so much glorifying of this type of work, and that's literally why we wanted this podcast, not to like, we're not negative people, but we just want to highlight like, this is the shit that goes down. And this is how these other entrepreneurs manage themselves. Like, so one of the things you mentioned was meditation. Is that a practice of yours that you do often? Is it just something that you do once in a while? You mentioned it earlier on. Tell me about it.
I'll give you the real truth of it if you guys want to hear like a wild and crazy story.
Always.
It's
go nuts. I love that.
So it started for me years ago. I was listening to, I don't know, some kind of speaker talk about something. I don't even remember what it was, but he mentioned a substance called ayahuasca, which has since kind of gone mainstream.
It sure has.
I'd never even heard of it. This was 2010 and nobody I knew what it was. And I remember just Googling. And it was a very weird thing because both my parents were raging alcoholics and my dad in particular, like just a lot of drugs and stuff like that. And so I was like, just anti-drugs, stay as far away from that. And then I'm reading about the stuff but Western medicine considers it the most powerful, potent hallucinogen on the face of the earth. And in the Amazon jungle, they consider it this like healing substance. All I knew is that every time I read a story, I'd see stuff like miraculous stuff where people had like eyesight restored or somebody like lifelong depression cured in a single time of drinking it. And the more I read about these things, the more I was like, okay, I got to try this at least once before I die. That was it. Like I was just kind of, and so it led to what happened for me was I decided one day just to buy it online, which I don't recommend. And because the way it works is it's illegal it's a tea made of 2 components, a vine and a leaf, and neither one does anything without the other. And if you mix them, you have broken the law, but ordering those independently is not breaking the law. So I cannot confirm broken the law, but I definitely didn't break the law.
You got around it. You got around it.
And anyway, I ended up trying it 6 times on my own. And I remember the first time I did it, it was like, I read all these crazy profound stories, but I took like a really mild, what the internet recommended as a starting dose. And like I saw a little bit of colors, but it was nothing very interesting. So the second time I did it a little stronger. It wasn't until the third time that I had like a real experience. And I remember I was sitting at home in my living room, and I was, for lack of a better term, just like hallucinating my ass off.
Mhm.
But I had read all this like mystical, profound, like one guy was like, I saw these angels and they all came down and they like healed me of all my lifelong affliction. And it was like, it was interesting, but it was not like profound. Like I was just hallucinating. And I remember asking this question in my mind. I just went, where is my mystical healing? And it still today is one of the strangest things that ever happened to me, but it like physically took over my body, and it, like I became like almost like a robot, like AI taking over or something. And my right arm went up like straight in the air, lunged down on the ground and grabbed this Kleenex box off the ground. And I remember like being freaked out by it. I like used my free hand and pushed that away. And I was like, that's too weird for me. So I asked the same question again, where's my healing? And again, right arm went up, lunged, grabbed this Kleenex box. So that happened 5 times. And on the 5th time, I was like, okay, if you're trying to show me something, I'll look. And I remember I looked into this Kleenex box, and it had like a universe kind of galaxy pattern painted on the outside. So like, I don't know, like, and it began to like become 3-dimensional. So I felt like I was looking at this whole entire universe in my Kleenex box. And then written on the outside, it said, of the words dreams and inspirations. And they started to sparkle and float out at me. And I felt super inspired. And so I spent like hours just looking into this Kleenex box universe. I probably would have been arrested if I was anywhere in public, but thankfully I was just sitting in my own living room. But the least profound part of the thing was there was like a blue butterfly in the bottom left of the Kleenex box. The next day I'm sober, like just, in everyday life. And I started seeing these like blue butterfly synchronicities, not like just once or twice, like 15 to 20 times a day, they would just pop up. I remember like I had my computer set where it would have, it would pick a random desktop background every 30 minutes, it would cycle. And I had like 3,000 nature photos to pick from, but it would always pick the 5 with blue butterflies. So it was just like, no matter how many times I read it, so I just like blue butterflies would pop up on my computer. I remember I was checking out books on Amazon. A book caught my eye very randomly about life after death, like near-death experiences. I clicked on it, and the cover was a blue butterfly. And then somebody said, if you're getting into these psychedelics, you should try listen to this guy named Terrence McKenna. And I said, okay, I'll watch a lecture by him. He's standing there giving a lecture, and he was wearing a blue butterfly t-shirt. And there were just so many like little things like that. And also like at the time, like I remember I would walk by clocks a lot, and they would be 1:11 or 11:11. They would all be like a single number.
That's
and not
ours.
always,
Yeah.
not always even the right time. Like we'd have a storm, and the VCR would go out, and it'd be flashing 11:11, but it wasn't actually 11:11.
Right.
But I just happened to walk by. I didn't walk by at 11:10. I didn't walk by at 11:12. And like it happened to me so many times a day that it was weirding me out. I didn't really have an explanation for what was happening. And I still remember the like probably the 2 weirdest ones for me. I guess they're like just so many of them are coming back. I remember getting a vegetable tray. My girlfriend's like, hey, can you grab a vegetable tray? I grabbed it, put it in the cart, didn't even look. We got home, the veggie tray was a blue butterfly where it had different veggies in its wings. And then the 2 weirdest ones, like I found it, like I couldn't even avoid it. I was like heavy into pornography at the time. And I remember the girl bent over, and on her butt was a blue butterfly tramp stamp. Just like nowhere I didn't see this thing. And then the one that was the most synchronistic to me was my girlfriend brought me a Legend of Zelda game, which was always my favorite game growing up. And like I hadn't played games in years and years, but she's like, there's a new Zelda game, you have to play this. And in the game, I'd walk through these meadows, and there was this blue butterflies that would float in a circle within the game. Like 3 or 4 of them would just float in a circle. And then at some point in the game, you're like 4 hours into it, and you get knocked unconscious, and the princess gets lost, and you got to kind of like go on this quest to save her. But in the game, you wake up, and there's like a spirit like sitting over your head, and it says, okay, I can't explain, but you need to follow me. And it brings you to this kind of temple. And in the temple, it teaches you this sacred healing song. And then it says, go play it where the blue butterflies gather. And so you go in the game and you play this healing song, and either when you play the song at these blue butterfly kind of points, either it heals your character fully in the game, like a bunch of hearts pop up out of the ground, or this stone pops out of the ground and gives you this like old ancient wisdom, or it's like a gateway point, and you like leave your physical body, go on this journey of spirit, collect things, and then come back. And so this whole ayahuasca thing like persisted for like 2 years, and then eventually I decided to to like, okay, today I'm going big. This is like my 5th or 6th time. I'm like, I'm going to have this experience that everybody keeps talking about. And I thought the real magic was the substance, which I no longer believe. But I decided to do 50 to 100 times as strong as the internet recommends.
Jesus.
And I remember I had a little prayer of intention. It was really, really simple. It was like, please God, don't fucking kill me tonight. Don't let them be this, to tell your parents this is how they found you OD'd in the backyard because you were too stupid to. And so that was my little prayer of intention. And I remember at some point in the vision, I saw a vision of one giant blue butterfly made of millions of tiny ones. And so at some point later towards the end of the experience, that's all I really remember from that journey. But I remember I was coming down and I was starting to sober up, still kind of like in it, but like, you know, I could function and stuff. And I went to the only person I could think that like could explain what was happening to me. And that person is called Google. And so I went there and I typed in blue butterfly ayahuasca. And I was like, this must mean something to somebody else. And there's a center in the Amazon jungle called Blue Morpho Tours. And their symbol is a blue butterfly. And so I was like, oh, that's really synchronistic. And so I remember at some point, it was a couple of days later, I reached out and said, you know, I was becoming really interested in this stuff. I was like, maybe you guys would be interested in a trade. Can I be your marketing person? And then you guys just let me come down on free tours whenever I want to do it. And I, unbeknownst to me, Hamilton Souther is a dear friend of mine and mentor who's ran Blue Morpho Tours for almost 20 years. They were doing a ceremony in the jungle, except he's a guy originally from California, but he had spent 10 years living in the Amazon. So he's very cut off from the Western world after a decade of living in the jungle.
Yeah.
And they were working on some music projects and they were like, we want to bring this music to the world because we feel this is healing music, but we don't know a thing about marketing. So he literally said, spirits, bring me a marketing person. And the next day I showed up and said, hey, I don't know if you guys would be open to this. Can I do some marketing for you? And I'll just come down there for free. And so I ended up having, you know, like a whole lot of crazy kind of, I don't even know what you'd call them, mystical, near death. I don't even have labels for them, but like, you know, I went deep, let's just say that, down at his center. And like, you know, meditation has been a side effect of that, but a lot of it is, it's not meditation the way people think of it, where I'm sitting there saying Om and blah, blah, blah. It's just, you know, going on sort of guided journeys of my own mind, as based on a lot of the things I learned down there. So I know that's a long story, but that's the
No,
truth
that's
of it.
fucking
So
It's a cool
awesome.
story though.
No, like so Ken, first of all, I just want to say, don't get any effing ideas about ordering it and doing it here.
Yeah, that
If you're
sounds like a
doing
pretty good idea
no
to me.
fucking way. Nuh-uh. I've told him like we've had a lot of our friends do plant medicine. It's you know, it seems to be, it is a lot more mainstream than ever before. And I've told Ken multiple times, like lately he's got to open, he needs to open up his heart more. And I said, I think, you know, we've done all the personal development, we've done all the 3D kind of shit. Now it's time to open up to plant medicine. I'm still shit terrified of it. Like I'm still firmly anchored to my ego and I'm like, meh, I'm not ready. But for Ken, I think he'd love it. But after hearing that story, Ken, are you like more into open to it now?
I like that story, yeah. Where you just in the comfort of your own home, relaxing.
Yeah, but
and
what if you
yeah.
freak out? I can't handle. He goes, would you get mad if I went running around the neighborhood naked? I was like, yeah, probably. If not, we were talking about mushrooms, not ayahuasca.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I love that story. I'm happy that you shared that because you know, they always say mother Aya she'll start to pop in when it's time. And she's been hanging around me for a couple of years. But now I'm like pushing it over to Ken, be like, maybe you should try it for us.
And
See how
have you
that
noticed
goes.
have you noticed any permanent changes, just like in your personality or the way you interact with stress or things like that?
I can tell you actually the very first thing that happened in my first ceremony, it was I remember going down there, and in my mind, I had made this stuff on my own. I made it 50 to 100 times as strong as the internet recommended. So I thought like I got a pretty good idea of like how voracious this stuff can get. And I didn't know this, but just talking like purely the substance and not like the effects like long term. But Blue Morpho Tours is known as having the strongest ayahuasca of any of the centers. And they also have they have shamans that facilitate these ceremonies for other people and that they train and stuff like that. And they have a special version for the shamans that they train on their own called the homebrew. And the homebrew, depending on the batch, is anywhere to 2 to 4 times as strong as what they give the guests. And then the most they ever give to anybody ever is they have these little shot glasses with like a blue butterfly imprinted on it, and they give a full cup, as they say. So like if you're going deep, you're going to have a full cup. Well, the first night there, they gave me a full cup of the home brew.
Oh,
And I should have known when I heard everybody go, ooh, ooh, like they knew like you're in for quite a night. And with most psychedelics, there's like a time delay from when you take it, usually around an hour, depending on your metabolism, before you actually start feeling the effects. When I poured a full cup of the homebrew, I was tripping my face off within 10 seconds of it being in my stomach. And I was
holy
like, it was so
shit.
absurdly intense that I was like, holy shit, like you're just getting started on this roller coaster.
Yeah.
And it was easily the most intense. But I remember at some point, it's funny because like the journey's like it's an interactive thing with the plant medicine. Like it goes a lot of times where you ask it to go and nowhere else, but it's very like literal and specific. And so for me, I remember I'd have like a lifelong anxiety. I don't know, I think I grew up with a mom who was always like permanently stressed out about money, and like we were just poor, and like every single dollar counted, and every single unexpected expense was like a deal breaker. And so I was just always anxious about money, and it was like it was
Yep.
really hard to be successful in business. And sometimes I would even have panic attacks about it that would like go anywhere from like an hour to sometimes like they would derail me for days and days.
Yep.
And so I remember the first clear thought I had in ayahuasca was like, I don't want to be anxious anymore. And so I remember the first thing I said is, why do I have this anxiety? And it's literal, so it'll just give you what you want. And I remember at some point, all of a sudden, all my lifelong anxiety just was magnified and intensified, and I could see all the places where it was happening. And it was just all these anxious moments were feeding itself. And I was just like in the middle of that, freaking out. And I remember after like what felt like to me like about 45 minutes of normal time, I remember Hamilton said, if ever you get in trouble, you either ask for me, one of the shamans, or call the head medicine spirit of ayahuasca, which in their lineage they call Papatua. You know, other people would call it the mother, whatever. So I didn't really know much about it, but I was like, Papatua, like, why are you kicking my ass? Right? Like, why? And I remember the first clear answer is, you ask why you have anxiety. I just showed you why you have anxiety. It's like, you wanted the answer, that's the answer. And I was like, yeah, but don't I have to know like why I have it in order to heal this thing? And I remember it's very funny to me in hindsight, but the spirits they use in their lineage, you're still always interacting with a part of yourself. It's not like always some external thing. So they like literally the things you see in there will use your own personality to communicate with you. So mine like talk like me, right? Like and so the head medicine spirit of ayahuasca looked at me, went right after I asked, don't I need to know why I have this? And it went, fuck no. I was like, okay. It's like, but how do I get rid of it? And I remember it just kind of winked at me and went, better question. And immediately I felt it was like, I could only describe it as like a planetary size shit in my colon. And I remember the only clear thought I had was like, get to the bathroom, like sprinting, like, and then I get into there, and thankfully there's 6 of them in Blue Morpho, and there's an abundance of free bathrooms, and I'm sitting in what we sometimes in ayahuasca you go into visionary states while you're sitting on the toilet, so they have a funny name for it where they call it the bathroom vortex, because you're literally tripping too hard to go. But I'm sitting there on the toilet, and all of a sudden I realized, like, okay, I felt like I had to urgently go, but I remember there's this planet-sized thing, and I'm like, I got a butthole maybe the size of a quarter on a good day. Like I used Play-Doh as a kid. That's bad math. Like, and I remember I said in my head,
Math ain't mathing.
I said to the head medicine spirit, I said, like, how am I supposed to ship this planet out? And I remember still, again, like they use your own personality, but I'll never forget the answer. It looked at me and said, hey, you just asked to be rid of the anxiety. The Drano is your fucking problem. And I like it still cracked me up to this day. And so I spent the next, I don't know, like 20 minutes like pooping out a lifelong anxiety that I
Oh, someone's breaking up.
really never had and stop it from spiraling out in seconds. And there's been tons of like little changes like that I feel have like really up leveled me as an entrepreneur, where you know, I'm not saying never have fear and I never have doubts and those like normal human emotions, but they're you know, like they don't stop me, and they're nowhere near as intense, and they're way less prominent. And I would say that like, you know, 90% of the time my mind is in positivity. I still have my moments of like, you know, freaking out and worrying, but it's like it's like literally for me like rewired my operating system. And
That's
I mean, I'm
amazing.
not saying it's the only reason I've been able to do the things I've been able to do, but it's certainly a big part of it. It's like, you know, I went from like freaking out about money and being unable to take the next step. Like how it would show up for me, I'd have a to-do list of like 20 fucking things. And instead of starting with number one that would move the needle, I'm like, let's build a little momentum and start with 20. And then we'll work on 19. And then there was never enough time to actually do the real work. As where now I'm like, I can look at number one in the list, do it in 5 minutes and just like be done. And it's like there's no fears about it. There's no anxieties about it. There's no and like a huge part of that is the things I've experienced in plant medicine. But having said that, it's not the magic bullet people think it is. I've, you know, and I
Right.
actually, the longer I've done this, you know, I've had lots of experience that tell me it was actually more the shaman who I
Mhm.
considered to be like a bartender at the start, facilitating it, than it is the actual ayahuasca. And I've met many people that have taken ayahuasca and had far less profound things happen to
Yeah.
them than
I think it's
some of the stuff
intention,
I've done.
right? Like, because
Yeah.
a lot of people do go into. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was
I think he has
unbelievable.
it in his cup right now, probably that your ayahuasca you're
I have
talking
Tim
to.
Hortons. You've got ayahuasca. It's all good.
Yeah.
But no,
You have to
and
have, yeah, you have to be open, right, Carol? Like you have to have an
yeah,
intention
like I've got
going
friends
into
who've
it
done it.
that you want to change, turn, whatever kind of thing. You can't be closed up and then it's going to
No.
magically fix you, is what you're
And
saying.
I think that most people that do ayahuasca are already open because that's a scary fucking
Well,
thing
that's
to
pretty
do.
open just
Like,
to get to that point to drink it, I
yeah,
would imagine.
Yeah.
I've got friends who do MDMA, like with a shaman, with a facilitator, and they're doing another ceremony. This lady comes, they're in Orange County. The lady comes to their house and she'll do it. The lady will sit with her and then the husband will do it. And they've had some crazy like healings from it because they go in with intention and it's like, we're doing this on purpose. We're not just doing this to get
Yeah.
like high and freaky and whatever. But thank you. I know that a lot of people, a lot of my friends, they're careful about sharing that kind of stuff. So I really do deeply appreciate you sharing that whole experience
Yeah.
because
Well, I wrote
I
a
know
chapter in
it's,
the book about it, so it's
oh,
kind of,
you gotta, we have to get that book, Kenny.
Yeah.
well, you guys
Um,
already heard the story in it. I did a short and abbreviated version in that. And the
I don't even know where to go from that. Like, I'm just like I got goosebumps a couple of times when you were talking about the butterflies. My mom passed, both we're kind of orphans almost. Ken's dad's alive, but my
yeah,
parents are gone and his mom's gone and grandparents are all gone and whatever. So like I always, when you're talking about the journey and ayahuasca and all that, it's hard when you're an orphan because there's no hierarchy anymore. You're it. And
yeah,
so a lot of time, I think those type of things like plant medicine, meditation, praying even is how you can sort of replace that feeling of, holy shit, I'm an orphan. I was, my mom died when I
yeah.
was just turned 30. So
I
yeah,
actually
thank
had.
you.
Can I just share one of those on
Yeah.
that specifically? I actually, one of the things, like talking about not being relatable to everyday people. But I had a vision 8 months before my dad died in one of my ayahuasca sessions, and I was like, it was very clear to me like my dad was going to die, and it was.
Mm.
And if you knew my dad, he was an alcoholic. He ate like shit. He did all
Yep.
kinds of drugs, and he just loved to party. He was believe it or not, he was one of the few drug addicts you'll meet that was really positive and fun to be around. But he was, very self-destructive, and. Like it wasn't the most like shocking thing to see a vision that like your dad's gonna die, because like I'm like, if you do basic math, like if you run the car at in sixth gear all the time, it's probably not going to make as many miles as
Right.
what other people do. But I remember I had a whole ceremony where I just processed all my grief, and I just just felt what it was like just to have the realization that my dad was going to die. And then 8 months later, we were standing there and he died. And I had zero internal emotional reaction. And it almost felt cold and callous to everybody. But I didn't know how to tell him, like, oh, I already saw all this 8 months ago. Right. So,
Yeah.
like, for me, I had to come to terms with this before this happened. And so now that it happened, like, I'm just here for you guys, whatever you need. Like, do you need a hug? Do you need support? But like, it was really interesting because, it's definitely made the whole concept of death easier. Like for me,
Mhm.
like I've just seen whatever people want to call is the beyond or whatever so many times that it's like, to me, it exists whether you believe it or not. And
Yeah.
so like I don't have fear about death the way I once did, other than just like, like not being there for my kids, I guess would be the worst part of it, but not necessarily like I'm afraid to die. What,
Right.
this great unknown that everybody else seems to struggle with. In fact, I think, talking about the COVID stuff where we were there, I feel like a lot of people are easily manipulated by their own fear of death, as where like it just doesn't
Right.
work out.
Have you ever heard of Bashar?
No.
I'll send you a link to him. I just discovered him on Instagram recently. He's like a bald guy. He looks, he's kind of funny looking, but he channels and he
Okay,
talks
maybe I
about,
have seen. Yeah.
yeah, like it was just random. I mean, obviously it's not random. The algorithm put him in front of me for a reason, but he talks a lot about like, so he says he talks about it like extraterrestrials, and he's always channeling, his eyes are closed, and people in your planet, and he talks like that, but he's talking about dimensions and all that type of thing. And I think like that's the really cool part about, I know this is not digital lifestyles related. Sorry, Ken, I know you're tripping over there,
That's
but
kind of digital. It's
no,
all you live in the digital lifestyle doing
yeah.
this.
But
Yeah.
like it's all this awakening. I don't like to use like I don't like to say journey and all that shit, but that's kind of what it is. There's sort of sometimes there's no other way to put it. But it's
Yeah.
like this awakening of people, and I think a lot of those people are people like us, where we don't take things like, we're critical thinkers, we're always looking to understand things on a deeper level, we understand oneness, like that's one of the biggest things. And I think at least with Ken and I, we've split up for a number of years at a time. Like we recently just got back together, we've been married for 23 years, we've both had to go on our separate corners for a couple of years to get my mom and dad were raging alcoholics. My mom died of cancer when I was 30. My dad died 5 years later because he couldn't handle life without her. He died and was frozen in a car for a week before anybody found him in Winnipeg at a hotel. Like really
Ooh.
deep, crazy shit. But
Yeah.
like when you go off, and however that looks, whether it's ayahuasca, mushrooms, meditation, fucking breath work, whatever, I think one of the beautiful parts about being a digital entrepreneur is that this is our world more than it would be if I was a 9 to 5er. Like 9 to 5ers still live in this matrix where it's like it feels like you're spending 2 hours on the 401 or whatever highway. Like it doesn't feel like you have the time to do the stuff we get to do. Like really, truly, I
Yeah.
believe that because we have the
Really
time.
compartmentalized your
Yeah,
lifestyle.
like as a digital person, like we don't have to go to the 9 to 5. Ken and I probably both, I mean, I've meditated already this morning. He'll do one tonight. Like I might do breath work. Well, like all that stuff that we're talking about, I think we have to kind of take pause and be like, holy fuck, like we get to do this because we've designed a life that we're able, and we have time freedom and location freedom. And maybe it's not all roses and all that shit all the time. It's not. We have money issues and stress too. But like we get to go do ayahuasca, and you can go take a week and go do that and come out of it a better man. And it's something to be grateful for. And yeah, so I don't know. I just felt like I had that on my heart to share it because I think it's
That's the
important to
freedom part,
notice.
right? You have the freedom
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
If I want to write some stuff from 10 o'clock at night till 2 in the morning, I can and go play golf in the day instead. I can shuffle around. I have the capacity to shuffle around my schedule and stuff like that. Whereas it's hard for people who are stuck in a 9 to 5 thing to focus anywhere else. Their life is pretty much planned out for them. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people have to ask to go to the bathroom when they have a job, kind of thing.
I'll tell you, it's like the whole day is reactive. And for me, because
Mhm.
obviously we all had a former life in that 9 to 5 world. The worst part of it was actually just how it began. The alarm clock for me, I was like, I hated waking up and then it's like you're already in the race. Like because
Yep.
at least for me, I'm sleeping till the last possible moment. So that means like I gotta rush to get ready, I gotta shower, I gotta get this, and you gotta get out the door, and like you gotta make it on time. And if you're 5 minutes late, the boss man will be sure to tell you.
Yeah.
And like most mornings around here, we just like snuggle with our kids depending on how crazy they are. And I notice it because like I wouldn't say we go to the beach every day, but probably like 5, 6 days a week at least. And it depends on the season, but like we're there a lot. And I can tell just like like one of the side effects of being so removed from the 9 to 5 is like days of the week don't really mean anything like they used to, right? It's not like
No.
the weekend has a very distinct feel than the days of the week. I can tell when it's Sunday because like all the Mexicans go to the beach. So I'll go there 7 days in a row, and then all of a sudden there's like 100 people here that weren't here yesterday. It was
Right.
totally empty 5 days in a row, and now all of a sudden there's 100 people. Oh, it's Sunday. That's right.
Yeah.
They all have their day off, and you can see the literal prison bars of like 5 days a week you're allowed to do this. And as you mentioned, Ken, it's like some guy tells you when you're allowed to shit. You got to ask, can I leave this meeting and go take a shit? Like,
In some
Crazy.
jobs, you actually have to, if you're on a line or
Yeah.
working some kind of machinery, you have to get subbed out so the production doesn't stop, so you can go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
That's
I don't,
wild.
there's times where I'm not, and like part of it's my hormones, because when you get this age, your hormones get wonky and you don't remember shit sometimes. But there's lots of days where I'm like, what fucking day is it? And I will have to look it up. Like I literally will be like, is it Wednesday? Like I have no fucking clue what day it is of the week at all.
Well, you're also in this lifestyle, you're not living for the weekend either. So
Right.
I tend to get more accomplished because it's not just that. If you talk to a lot of people who do the Monday to Friday thing, it's just they're just living for the weekend, and then the weekend they shut their brain off. Leisure things and maybe fun things, but nothing what we would call productive getting done, and just dreading the start of the cycle again on
I love Monday. I love the beginning of the week. I love all the days, but yeah, it's yeah.
I don't like the weekend on the golf course. Other than that,
No, too busy.
Yeah.
Kenny, do you have any questions? I'm done. I mean, I've got all I needed to get out of the ayahuasca thing. That was
I think we got
brilliant.
a lot of story today. All these regular little questions aren't that?
Yeah, they're a little
Hey,
mundane.
Did you pick up any
tours I wasn't planning on, but that's all good.
Did you pick up any since you moved there? Have you picked up any favorite foods or anything that are more Mexican street food type things, or anything that you never had before?
It's still wild to me that actually we can go out and like especially like street food is actually my favorite. Like I take my family to fancy restaurants and stuff too, but I can feed a family of 5 for like $10. Like that's so
Stop
low.
that.
And this is a relatively like as far as Mexico goes, this is a very expensive area where all the locals are like, I can't believe how much shit cost here. I'm like, it's $10 for 8 tacos. What do you mean? It's like, how can you say that's a lot, right? But because we're in Baja specifically, it's seafood. It's all like fish tacos is the local delicacy. And Ilka's always like, we're not eating fish tacos again. I'm like, how do you ever get sick of this? Like, the best.
Delicious.
That's cool.
What did you want to ask the sport question?
No, he gave me way more than enough info. Usually, well, I've been asking people like, if you're into sports, I don't know, are you into sports down there in Mexico? Do you follow any teams or any of that kind of stuff?
I've been to a couple of like baseball games, and I want to go to a soccer game. It's a little hard because they don't publish stuff like you're used to in Canada. Like you can click on a website and read all the information and the dates. Like you just got to know where the damn thing is listed. And often it's on like some private Facebook page, or there's a guy you got a message on WhatsApp. So a lot of times here I miss stuff. There was a time like, you mentioned like kind of changes I've been through. I still love sports. I used to be like really hardcore into it. So I grew up like a Pittsburgh Penguins fan. And I remember when they didn't win, like I was the guy like yelling and screaming at the TV and throwing stuff like, how could you let that go in? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like I was totally that guy.
Yeah.
And at some point in my ayahuasca journeys, I came very it became very obvious to me that it was a group of millionaire entertainers playing a kids game going against another group of millionaire entertainers. And it's only designed to entertain you. That's all it's for. And so like I still enjoy it, but I enjoy it from like watching it like I'm watching the circus. I don't get that into elephants or whatever, and I don't rant and rave, and I kind of hang my hat a lot more on my own personal accomplishments and failures rather than like my team won. I'm like, I'm not better than you because my team won. I'm not worse than you because they lost. Like I don't have any of that left in me.
I definitely tone that down myself. I've seen a lot of guys online talking about when you spend too much time watching sports, following a team, you're putting your dreams on hold to follow the dreams of these young men who are following their dreams and making tons of money doing it, kind of thing. So it kind of resonated with me, where I still like sports. I'll still watch the Blue Jays. I watch the Leafs, the hockey season occasionally, but not even remotely the way I used to. A much different kind of feel.
I actually spent a summer working for the Blue Jays, and my neighbor down here is a former NHLer, so we talk Lots of fun. And the beautiful thing is I talk so much trash to him that I could beat him. Obviously, I'm not going to beat a former NHL player, but because we're in Mexico and there's no rink to prove it, I don't ever have to like back up that trash talk.
That's pretty Canadian of you, to be honest. So
Yeah.
well done.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for taking us where it went.
Thanks for making this show, guys. It's like
Yeah.
everybody talks about how to generate leads, but nobody's talking about like what it's actually like behind the scenes, the man behind the.
Yeah. Well, if you know of anybody who
a
you
lot of
think would
fun.
be good to come on here that we could fuck around with just as easily, let us know. Cause
I know there's a million on Josh's group, but I don't think we're allowed to post
no,
that,
we're not.
that podcast on there. So
I got a few. I'll send you
Yeah.
guys some people.
Perfect.
okay, awesome.
Awesome. All right, man. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. I'll let you know when we go live, and we'll talk to you guys on the next episode. Cheers.
Thanks a lot.